Hi, this is Brett Senkis with Senkis Law and Brayton Woods. I'm an M&A advisor and an M&A lawyer. If you like this video, check out merger-resources.com. There's all sorts of videos, articles, templates, checklists, tools, all about mergers and acquisitions, and all free all the time, so check it out.
Disclosure schedules, or also sometimes called seller's disclosure schedules, are a document that is attached, that is prepared in between or before closing, and it's attached to the purchase agreement. So that could be an asset purchase agreement or stock purchase agreement or a merger agreement, whatever the fundamental definitive document that controls the M&A deal is called. The disclosure schedules are attached to it and made a part of it. And these schedules, it's a Word document, and every page is a different schedule. And these schedules are numbered to correspond to the sections of the purchase agreement that they reference to, that they accompany. So, well, there's two different types of schedules primarily. There's lists of information. So, for example, there might be a section of the purchase agreement that talks about employees, and it might say Section 4.5 contains a list of every employee of the company, including their date of hire, title, current salary, or something like that. There might be a schedule for all the purchased assets in a smaller deal, or excluded assets, or lists of the intellectual property that the business owns. So lists of information, and generally it's the kind of thing that it's quite a bit of information. So to put into the body of the purchase agreement would be kind of inefficient. And the other type of schedule is an exception to representations and warranties, primarily the seller's representations and warranties. So that's a fancy lawyer term for statements of fact as of a given time. So the seller will make many representations and warranties about the business to the buyer, and those representations and warranties in a two-step deal where you sign today and you close later need to be true and correct, or true and complete on the day of signing and the day of closing. In other deals where you just sign and close at the same time, those representations and warranties need to be correct and complete at the time of signing. So these statements are about the business. They might be, a statement might be, except as set forth in Schedule 5.6, there is no litigation ongoing or to the knowledge of sellers threatened that would affect the company. Something like that. Or none of the material contracts require a consent to assign them. Actually, that's never been the case. There's always, I mean, almost always we're dealing with consents to assignment. But other than as set forth herein, no consents to assignment are required. Other than as set forth on Schedule 5.7, there are no consents to assign any material contracts. And then Schedule 5.7 will list all the contracts that require consent. So these schedules are an important part of the deal. They form the basis of, well, a lot of times what the they'll explain the business and important pieces of what the important things about what the buyer is inquiring, and there are also exceptions to these representations and warranties. Now, if a representation or warranty is incorrect in a private deal, it's different in public deals, but in a private deal, which is most of what we're talking about here, those form the basis of a post-closing claim for indemnity and for the sellers to have to pay some of the purchase price back to the buyer. So it's important to get the representations and warranties correct, and the exceptions are carve-outs from them. So we tell our selling clients, hey, that's when in doubt, disclose it. If it's not part of the deal, if it's not on the paper, it's as though it doesn't exist. That's an important point. Almost every purchase agreement is going to have something called an integration clause that says everything is committed, everything is on these, and within the four corners of the documents that comprise the closing, the purchase agreement and the other closing documents. In other words, it's all on paper and part of the deal, or it doesn't exist. And we'll often have a seller say, well, no, they know about that, they know about that. Well, they may, but they may forget about that. They may misremember. The person who knows about that may be fired. You know, there's all sorts of reasons that. So we got to get something out on, put it in the schedule. The buyer is part of this process, and sometimes if they've been heavily involved in the due diligence process and they're used to doing deals, so a private equity group or something like that that's bought a lot of companies will help prepare the schedules because they kind of know what should go on them because they've been knee deep in all the documents and agreements and so forth. But they are the seller's responsibility. So even if the buyer takes the pen and helps put things on there, the seller needs to own those schedules and to make sure that all the information that needs to be listed is listed, and all the carve-outs that need to be in there are carved out. And it's not exactly a get-out-of-jail-free card, but it kind of is. I mean, the carve-out is generally an exception to the representation and warranty. So that the litigation example, except as set forth in that schedule, there is no litigation. Well, if there's some litigation, you put it on the schedule, and now the buyer owns that problem. Most of the time, that's how that works. So sometimes there's sensitivity to putting something down. Usually if it's a sensitive area, there's a reason it's sensitive, and that's all the more reason to schedule it, but we still have to talk about it, and there are times, weird cases where we understand the seller's point of view or selling client's point of view, which is like, that could be, it really isn't a very big deal, but I could see how someone would think it's a big deal. There's that sort of thing. But you really want, as much as possible, put everything on those schedules. Get the information on them, because the information forms the basis for representations. You list all of your employees. You want to get that right. You don't want to miss any. Otherwise, the buyer could come back and say, I didn't know that we had to pay John $90,000 to answer phones. And I don't want to do that. That's a misrepresentation. So need to get this right. It should start during the due diligence process. Oftentimes, sellers, if they haven't been through this before, don't know what these schedules are. And so we're sort of helping them get this going. And the buyer wants to see those schedules sooner than later, because the buyer wants to understand what it is we're going to put on there, what we're going to try and pass over to them. So the buyer's usually heavily involved. Now, the reality is they often don't show them. We're not producing the first version until sometimes a week or two before closing. It just depends on the deal. But we're trying to get them out as soon as possible, and buyers are very interested in what it is you're going to put on there and sort of pass my way. So that's seller's disclosure schedules. That's some M&A jargon for you, make you feel like an insider. If you have questions about them, let me know. We're going to put a sample of those up on, if they're not already up on merger-resources.com. So we'll have those up probably before this video goes live. So thanks for stopping by today. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, subscribe, like it. Have a great day.